Hello and welcome to everyone out there in the Actual Tech Media audience. Thanks so much for joining us on this special webinar event. The topic today, of course, is MVP Panel Talk. Do you need to back up Microsoft 365? This event is presented in partnership with our friends over at Veeam. Thank you so much for their support, and thank you to everyone out there in the audience for joining us. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm serving as the host. I do want to make sure that you know that we encourage your questions on this event. We always want these events to be educational. Many of you have already said hello and good afternoon there in the questions pane of the audience console. We love to see that, but we also want your technical questions along the way. We will be taking all your questions live on the event, so keep those questions coming. We even have a best question prize to help maybe further encourage some questions or shake some questions loose. I'll talk about that here in just a moment. But first, I want to call your attention there to the handouts tab as well. It's there that you'll find a link to a number of resources, including the Gartner report on should I back up Microsoft 365, the full Microsoft 365 Backup for Dummies guide that you can download, the Microsoft 365 Best Practices demo, and a free 30-day trial of Veeam. And then finally, don't forget about the limited time offer to save 15% on Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. So some excellent resources you want to make sure that you check out before you go. We also, at the end of the event, will be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found right there in your handouts tab. All right, and with that, one more thing I do want to mention. Like I said, we also on today's special event have a $50 gift card for a best question prize. We'll be selecting the prize winner for that after the event and contacting them via email. You must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. All right, with that housekeeping information out of the way, let's kick it off. I'm excited now to bring in Mr. Edward Watson, who is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, who will be our moderator for the event. Edward, take it away.
David, pleasure as always. And as you mentioned, we have a great show set up for today. Before we get started, one of the questions I get is, what is a Microsoft MVP? A Microsoft MVP is actually an award presented and given by Microsoft that recognizes these fine individuals as community technology experts and leaders for their contributions. Today we have MVPs in the M365 Apps and Awards category, making them very uniquely qualified to answer all your difficult questions today. We have Joy Apple, 2 times awarded MVP, Vlad Catrinescu, 9 times awarded, and Mr. Paul Stork, 15 times awarded MVP. So we're getting into the holiday season, and look, we're doing lots of planning as well. And planning is looking at our applications and services and saying, which ones do I want to start protecting next year? High on that list is hopefully Microsoft 365. So as David mentioned, we invite you to start putting in your questions into the pane. We do have some initial questions we'd like to kick off this panel discussion with. But ultimately, hopefully what you get from this is that M365 is quite a valuable application you need to start protecting. But let's kick this conversation off. What are some of the reasons organizations are looking to protect this data and should be backing up this data? Let's start with you, Vlad. What are your thoughts around some of those reasons to protect Microsoft 365 data?
Hello, everyone. And Edward, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Backup is one of those things a bit like insurance. If you ever need it and you don't have it, as they say, it's a bit too late to apologize at that point. But like you said, what could bring you to that moment where you're like, I wish I had a backup? At the top of the list, I would say a bit more of the more flashiest ones are out there are all of the threat actors out there. I'm sure you've seen a lot of companies in the news for really not the good reasons on something happened, they got hacked, all of their data was encrypted, and then they didn't have a backup. Because if they had a backup, they just had to say, okay, you know what, take everything offline, restore everything. It'll take a day or two. They won't even have time to put it in the news, and we'll be back online. Everything will be normal. But many companies out there, especially when they get hacked, that's when the security budget always goes higher after a hack, especially when they realized they were not protected. So you have the hacking, things like that. You have the internal risks or insider risk. Uh, Unfortunately, we're seeing so many layoffs in the past few weeks, especially in the tech industry. But we're seeing a lot of layoffs, and we're seeing a lot of people not happy, of course, about being laid off. What happens if an employee, and I'm using the layoffs because it's in the news right now, but what happens if you fire an employee but you forget to remove one access from them? They're really not happy about it. They can just go in, if they have the right permissions, they can delete a lot of things, and that can lose a lot of money for the company. If you have a backup, of course, you make sure you delete the permission they had, then you restore everything. You'll be back in business in a few hours. But there's so many things in the Microsoft ecosystem that if they're deleted by an admin, it doesn't go to a recycle bin. It doesn't go to a place where you can restore them. So that can really cause huge damage to the company. So those are my top two that make the news all the time. The other,
right. Anything?
my,
Oh,
I was
sorry.
going to say
Go
my
ahead, Vlad.
third one.
Yeah.
I talk too much. That's what happens when I
You're
just had a
fine.
coffee right before the webinar. The third one I was going to say is that accidental deletion. The one that happens the most often, but the one that never makes the news, when somebody from HR by accident, they go in Teams, they delete something, they wanted to put a heart icon on it, but it was too late. It was Friday 5 p.m. They delete it, and then Monday morning you get a help desk ticket being like, hey, I deleted this by accident. Can you restore it really quick for me? And there's so many things out there in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem that don't even go to recycle bin. I mean, go delete a Teams conversation. Where does that go? If you delete stuff from your inbox, then you delete it from your deleted items because you clear out all that junk on Friday. Where do you restore that from? So I think the biggest thing for me, the one that you will use your backup solution the most often for, is that accidental deletion. And as an IT person, you want to be an enabler, and you want to say, hey, you did something wrong. We'll get you back working in a few hours, instead of saying, hey, well, too bad you made an error. Go redo all the work that you lost. But Edward, I would say those are my top three.
Those are pretty good reasons. Anything to chime in with, Joy or Paul?
Well, I would
So
say,
I'll add. Go ahead, Joy.
okay, I was going to say probably the one that we do come in contact with day in, day out with the user base out there is exactly what Vlad was saying, the accidental deletion. And I think we have this thought of like, oh, well, it's going to be in the recycle bin. I can go get it back whenever I want. Can you? Right? Because you only have a limited 90-day window of time. Or, well, we'll just put in a ticket with Microsoft and they'll be able to go get that back for us. Will they? Right? What was deleted and what's the impact on what's going to get restored back for the rest of that business department or the environment that's there? So those are the ones I think are the most common. Like Vlad said, they don't hit the news because they're not flashy and, these big headlines, but it's very impactful day by day for the business users.
The other thing that I would add is a lot of people have the assumption that as long as I can get it back, that's good enough. And the problem is that even if you can get it back, you have to realize that there are expenses and time involved in recovering those items to get them retrieved. And that's costing you time and money. So if you have it where you can recover it, great, maybe that keeps you out of the news. But if it takes you 2 or 3 days to do it, that's a lot of lost time. And that time that you've lost also costs you a lot of money. So sometimes going inexpensive on a backup solution that is good enough is not going to be good enough, because there are other factors involved that you need to take into account as well.
Great points, guys. And I think that really sets us up very well for the rest of the conversation here. But let's do a little bit of a deep dive into these compliance tools, because we do see that a lot of companies are using them maybe instead of a backup. How does that look, Joy? Many organizations do use those tools and they think they're covered from data loss. Why isn't Compliance Center necessarily enough to remove the need for a backup?
You know, compliance is phenomenal, right? Those policies are
Sure.
amazing and they extend safety and security. But once you delete something, that policy doesn't get it back for you, right? That's kind of where that rubber starts to meet the road. So I can have a beautiful archival policy, but what if the policy ran that says this team, this workspace has been inactive for 180 days? Let's delete it. You know, what if I've clicked that button? Oops. So we deleted it and it was inactive for 180 days. And then another 180 days go back and we realize there was something very important that we need to get back for maybe just another compliance reason. But it's been gone for quite a while now. What do I do? That's when the cloud backup utility is going to be invaluable, to get that information back, to make sure that what we have is not only secure from a policy perspective, but from an accessibility perspective for the business.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Great points, Joy.
Let me jump in on that. One of the things about compliance is that it's really designed to support compliance, not designed to support having things protected in terms of backup. So the whole point of compliance is that in most organizations, there are legal requirements to keep a certain amount of information available for a certain period of time. But the bottom line on all that is you keep that material available because you may be required to produce that in case of some kind of a legal suit. So the compliance tools usually are built around the idea of, I'm going to protect all this information so that I can get it back. But when you go to get it back, the whole push of that is to grab all that information and burn it onto a DVD so that you can hand it over to the opposing counsel on the other side so that you can prove that you're not hiding anything. Well, that's really nice for compliance, but it really doesn't do anything for you in terms of backup, because to get that information then back in your system, if you've lost it, you've got to go then take that DVD and start copying files one at a time, which is very labor intensive. So compliance is great for compliance, but to use it for backup, you're really using it for a purpose that it wasn't meant for. It's the old adage,
retrieval tool.
If what you have is a wrench, then everything in the world looks like a nut, even if it's a nail. It's not necessarily the right tool for backup. You can use it that way, but it's not what it's designed for, and it's going to cause you issues if that's what you depend on. The other problem with compliance is that it is designed around individual pieces of content. And so one of the realities of compliance is very often you will create your policies to cover information that hasn't been put into your system. And those policies will then apply to that information when it's added. But what if you add a policy? What does that do for the information that's already in your system? If you have some document that's sitting out there and you go put a compliance policy that will apply to it, it won't actually do anything with that document until the next time you edit the document. It's just going to sit there and fly below the radar. And if somebody deletes it, nobody's ever going to notice. It's just the way that compliance is built. It's not built to be backup. It's built to be compliance.
Just to
Really
add
great
to that,
point.
and I mean, there's not much I can add to already what Joe and Paul said. And the speed of recovery, I would say, if I would add to things, the speed of recovery, usually it's not the SharePoint admin or the Teams admin that even have access to the compliance center. So when
It's
you
true.
lose something, you open up help desk, they go to the SharePoint admin, then they have to go to the compliance admin. They have to hopefully find it in the e-discovery center, give it to you, and then kind of as a, hey, you want your Teams chat back? Here's an HTML page with it. We cannot restore it back in Teams. Or here's the document by email, but I probably lost all of the versioning and things like that on it. So it's amazing for compliance. It's not built to be a backup, and Microsoft will not make it a backup solution because it's really a compliance feature. The other thing is, what happens if an admin makes a mistake when they create a compliance policy? When you create a retention policy, you only need to make an error on like 2 checkboxes, and you can automatically delete all of the data that's more than 3 years old instead of automatically keeping data for 3 years. There's only a few checkboxes different. You don't take a cup of coffee in the morning. You do your job just to make sure it's done by the end of the week. And then you can lose a bunch of data. And with retention policy, once it's deleted, it's gone. That's the whole point of, in a way, retention policies. So that's when you also want to have a backup, because you might do a mistake as an admin when you configure a compliance tool. So it's really important to have.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll add just a smidge to that too. And you mentioned the admin centers and the admins going in to see what's to retrieve something or to fulfill a request. Admin's probably going to be one of the last people to know when something critical has been deleted. The user may not even realize that what was accidentally deleted was critical or was important. So the longer that time goes on, the less probable it is we're going to be able to go back to the recycle bin that we have available in the product to get that item, that object back. And time is critical when it comes to being able to retrieve those deleted items. If it's even something that goes to the recycle bin.
Along the same lines, if your loss of information is because of some catastrophe, your admins are probably the people who are going to already be the busiest trying to rebuild the system, much less they need to go spend a lot of time trying to get data back.
Very true.
What about those last resort scenarios? Folks say, well, at the very least, I can always go back to Microsoft. And possibly do a little begging and possibly get the data back. What would be your response there, folks?
Who's going to go first?
I'll let Paul start, because Paul didn't start yet. So Paul, you go first.
I'll handle this one. One of the things that Microsoft always says, if you read their license agreements, they will always say they'll make a best case effort. And what they mean by that is they'll do their best to help you, but they're just going to do what they can. There are no guarantees that they have that information out there that they can get it for you. They do backups of their system, but they don't keep them forever. And, a lot of times it's just not feasible for them to spend the time and effort to go digging in their stuff to try and find one file. And so best effort won't necessarily get you out no matter how much you beg. It's not that they will turn your back on you. They'll try to help, but there's only so much that they can do within a realistic time frame. And a lot of times what they can do within a realistic time period isn't going to help you.
Especially if this is a personal pet peeve of mine, but we see like very critical processes being run in Excel 97, right? So Joy deleted the spreadsheet, right? And it's something that we do maybe once a quarter, twice a year, something like that. But this super business critical spreadsheet has been deleted. Let's say that Microsoft gives you back, we used to call it like the content database restore, something like that. Like you get this bigger thing. You're now overwriting everything that's happened since the last time that spreadsheet was utilized, right? You probably can't overwrite 90 days worth of a department's data just to get the one thing back. And if you're willing to make that trade, holy moly, get that out of Excel.
Uh, in addition to that, and Paul is talking about best effort, I think that even if they wanted, being able to restore just one file from Microsoft is almost impossible. I think the max that they can do for SharePoint and OneDrive only is to restore the full site collection, but override everything that actually was done in between the time when that file got deleted and you talking to support, dealing with everything. So probably another 2 weeks. So you would maybe get that file back, but you would lose another 2 weeks worth of work because you restore on top of it. So I don't think they even have the ability to do it, especially if you look at Microsoft's privacy principles, with a lot of customers even having customer lockbox and things like that, where support engineers don't have access to your data. They can just log in, have a secret account in your tenant, and go mess around. That's why
Find the file.
if you never had to deal with Microsoft support yet, you're lucky. I wish you never have to go through this because it's not the most fun part. But basically, they give you like a meeting link, and then you open it, and then you show them stuff on your desktop. It's not like they have any backend access. They look at your screen to replicate stuff. They ask you for the logs. They don't get all of that on the backend. So, yeah, if ever you need anything restored from Microsoft, good luck for that. And even if you do, it's not going to be the item you wanted. It's going to be,
Right.
hey, you want something back? Here's the haystack on top of what you already have. Now figure out what you wanted back. But you can't only get one single file, one single item back. And that's only for SharePoint and OneDrive, not really for Teams, for Exchange, for any of the other things.
Great points, guys. I think that really did cover the compliance angle. Let's talk about restores. There are restore options, right, in M365. Are there limitations? What are some of the maybe challenges with restoration? Paul, why don't we give this one to you?
So go back to something that Joyce said in the last conversation. She's got that scenario where it's a spreadsheet we use like once a quarter and somebody deletes it. The chances that you notice that before the next quarter comes up are slim. Oh, wait, the time period on deletions, even if it's in the recycle bin, is at most 90 days. And that's assuming that it doesn't age out first. So you're on your 91st day and you're going looking for that file that was deleted 91 days ago. Oops, you're out of luck, even though you've got a recycle bin. The other thing that gets into this, there is, for example, in OneDrive, there is a feature called file restore. And what a lot of people don't realize is that some of these features in compliance and file restore and so forth are very dependent upon other features in SharePoint. And one of the features that is very dependent upon is that you have versioning turned on. File restore is the idea. I can go into OneDrive and I can go back and say at any point in time, I want to get this one file at that particular point in time. Well, if you don't have versioning turned on, you're not going to get it at all, because the way that it does that is it goes back and looks through the previous versions and finds the version that was live at that point in time, and that's what it restores. But most people who don't understand the process don't realize that if they go in and turn off versioning because they want to save space, that they're completely turning that feature off, and you now can't restore anything from file restore. Last thing I'll say about this is we've been talking about using compliance tools as a backup strategy. As was mentioned, compliance tools are normally very tightly secured in terms of who can access those to get information back out again. And when you need to do a restore, more than likely the people that you want doing the restore are the people who are closest to the content, which is the owner of the information. They're not going to have capabilities in the compliance center. It's going to be the people who are at central administration, who are very busy anyway, who are the ones that are going to have to go in and try and get that file back. So it becomes a very, very time-consuming process because there are so few people who can do it. And usually it's not the people that you really want doing it anyway.
Central administration, Paul? That's a while ago. Do you mean the admin centers now?
Never mind.
Potato, potato.
Those of you that worked with SharePoint for a few years now will get that joke. If you're not from the SharePoint world, just brush it off, as you do with most SharePoint stuff anyway.
And what he's
I
really
think
saying
most
is if you're
people-
not old like Paul.
I think most people can't keep up with all the name changes lately, but we'll leave that at that.
I think there's always a migrating Microsoft rebranding team, and each quarter they go to another product group and they find stuff to rebrand. They just finished compliance, adding Purview in front of everything. So we'll see where they go next. We'll see next year
Syntax.
what gets rebranded. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Syntax as well.
Yep, yep.
So we're getting a few questions, guys, around what do we do in terms of actually looking at backup? We've talked a lot about the pains of Compliance Center and some gaps there. What are some of the, kind of looking more at the third-party backup side of the house? What do we actually do to validate these backups? What should we be looking for in a third-party backup? What are the must-haves? Vlad, why don't we dive into that?
Well, Edward, of course, you gave me the 5 questions into one, so let me try and answer
Sorry about that.
one of them. Okay, so I'm looking at the question as well, and one of them is kind of how do you test it?
Sure.
Something that we did on-prem and we have to keep doing online is test your backups, right? It's something that, again, even on-prem, using Microsoft, whatever tool you use, out of the box, not out of the box, always test your backups, because you can say you have good backups, but until you can restore them, you don't know if it will actually work. So always have an exercise of testing your backups, whether that is doing it in a test tenant or even in your production tenant. And then, you go in your own mailbox, you delete something that had no business value, and then you try to restore it, or you try to restore an old file that you deleted 3 months ago. You go in that backup from that 3 months ago, and then you try to restore it. Create your own validation exercises and make sure you do them on a regular schedule. So that's the answer to that question. Now, what are we looking for in a third-party backup? I would say for me three most important things. First of all, there's a lot of third-party backup solutions that only focus on one single tool. So you have an Exchange Online backup solution, and then you have others that are SharePoint Online backups or Teams backups. And what happens if you delete the Microsoft 365 group and you have information kind of stored in those 3 different backup solutions? How do you actually restore that as a whole? Your admins will lose so much time learning those 3 tools, configuring them, updating them, that you're not actually going to save any money. So try to look at a vendor that actually has all of the different tools you want to back up, and you can back all of them with a single solution. That will make your admin's life so much easier, and will also be, in a way, a proof to you that that company is really invested into making it work for the whole suite, and they didn't just kind of say, hey, we can make a product out of our migration tool. Let's make a backup solution for SharePoint. And kind of that's how their backup solution was made. And the last thing is, where can you store information and how fast can you restore it? Are you limited to storing it in their storage, in their Azure or whatever accounts? Do you have to put it on-prem? Can you automatically copy it to another cloud provider? Like, can I back up 365 data and Azure AD data and put it into AWS? So if Microsoft goes down, I can still have that data. Can I put it into cheaper storage? Like, I don't want to have to pay for like SSDs in Azure all the time. Can I just say, hey, all the backups that are older than 1 month or 3 months or whatever rule you want to make, can I just put them on the super cheap cold storage in AWS, for example, where I pay a few cents per terabytes per month? I won't even see that cost on my invoice. Can I do that? And the last thing is, how can I make my IT people more productive by saying, hey, you know what? You deleted something. Let me empower non-IT people to restore it. Of course, you give them a sandbox. You secure that sandbox. You don't give them access to everything. But if they're a site owner and somebody in their site deleted something, why wouldn't I let them restore it? I already gave them the permissions to delete it. I have to give them permissions to restore stuff as well. So can we empower the end user to be more productive and also reduce the load on IT? This way, IT can focus on the really important stuff rather than people accidentally deleting things. So either I answered all the questions, Edward, or I forgot the rest of them, but that's all I got. I know it was a loaded question you gave me.
I think you got it, Vlad. Joy, Paul, any other thoughts on what makes the perfect backup solution?
I have thoughts. So
Okay.
one thing
Go ahead, Joy.
too, Vlad, you almost went there, I thought too, but having a tool that can help you back up content from a variety of platforms, especially our larger organizations, probably are not invested 100% in Microsoft. Vlad, you mentioned AWS or Google or those platforms that are out there. One-stop shopping for backup. Vlad, like you said, you're able to consolidate the skill sets, which is going to save time and save money. I mean, time is money, right? So being able to get to multiple platforms for backup and recovery, unified skill sets, that can go a long way too.
Great. Anything to add, Paul?
I think about the only thing I would add would be on the testing scenario. It is critical that you test things. I used to work for a bank, and one of the things that's true of banks is they are legally required to every so often run full tests of their entire system, that they can literally go in and restore it at a cold site within 2 days and be back up and running. And we used to run those weekends every so often just to prove that it could be done. You want to do that with your backups as well. The softwares that we're talking about here are really the backbone of running your business. And once they're gone, it's too late to find out that they're gone. So you really have to take some time and effort and formally plan to test your backups on an occasional basis, just to make sure that, as Vlad said at the very beginning, by the time you need the insurance, it's too late. So you got to plan ahead. And I would make that a formal plan, not just a haphazard, we got some time today, let's go test our backup. Pick a time and do it like quarterly or twice a year, where you're going to set aside a day and the crew's going to come in on Saturday and do a full-blown test of the backup strategy and see how much we can get restored to some trial tenant that we build out there, just to make sure that it's doable.
No, great points, folks. So we're going to take this segment of the panel discussion and kind of look at how Veeam does it. So, and a little bit of a spoiler alert, because I think Vlad and the folks here pointed out some very great attributes of some things I'll be covering. But we're going to be talking about Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. So this is a solution that's really been in the market the past 6 years. Covers a wide variety of M365 applications to date, everything from Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business and Teams, and of course your on-prem applications for a real hybrid protection model. We help protect against a variety of different threats. Of course, we've mentioned basically all, I've really covered the gamut of the use cases here for the risks. Provides a variety of different restore options, actually 45 different restore options to date, really allowing you the flexibility because no backup is complete without the ability to restore exactly how your business requires. And then there might be a lot of companies out there we're talking to today that have legal and compliance requirements. They need to get, find that needle in a haystack, that individual file or site, and hand that off for legal reasons. And certainly that is a huge use case for us at Veeam. I will go back to the panel here. Are you guys seeing a lot of legal requirements on your side with clients you work with in terms of M365? Is that increasing, decreasing? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, definitely, I think increasing. And kind of strangely, it's from the other side of the fence that I've run into companies having an issue, and that is sensitivity to be able to go into a backup system and find a piece of data and delete it because it has passed its lifetime. Compliance is all geared about keeping information for a particular time period because you're legally required to keep it that long. You do not want to keep it 1 minute longer than that. You want to keep it up to the point where the legal requirement is met, and then you want to get rid of it, because if you still have it when the lawyers come looking for it, you have to produce it even if it's beyond that date. And so one of the things that I've run into in the past with backup systems is making sure that there is the ability to go in through some kind of an e-discovery system, find data that has passed its expiration date in the backup, and be able to actually then extract that and get rid of it without actually getting rid of the entire backup, because there's only certain pieces that need to be extracted and removed.
Yeah, great point, Paul.
I would definitely say definitely increasing, and you always had the big companies like the banks, things like that, that always knew they needed a backup. But we're starting to see a lot more of that small, medium business. And I'm talking less than 5,000 users, less than like between 200 and 1,000 users that before were a bit more, well, they like to call it agile. I like to call it a bit more just winging it. We'll just, oh, you need a tool, we'll just put the company credit card, we'll buy it. We won't care about any of this stuff. But as we're reaching a certain level of cloud maturity where all of their tools are now in the cloud, they start to have a bit more processes. Backup is coming into the picture, backup compliance, all of that. So I'm starting to see it a lot more in that small and medium enterprises as well, where before it was mostly a big enterprise thing.
Yeah. Anything to add there, Joy?
Well, it's got me thinking about my clients in the oil and gas industry. They're going through a radical transformation ever since the colonial pipeline situation to get everything off of prem and to make sure that where they put it is secure and reliable, which means they have to have secure and reliable backup and restores. That's a critical piece of infrastructure globally. They have a lot of pressure and a lot of things are changing for them on the security and compliance side of the world. So tools like this are going to be extremely critical in helping them meet those regulatory demands, we'll say.
Yeah, and kind of speaking about, the level of innovation and the pace of innovation, that kind of leads me into infrastructure freedom, because ultimately companies today, they want to be able to deploy the solutions anywhere, whether on-prem or in the cloud, maybe even leverage BaaS. They want to leverage maybe AWS 1 year, Azure the next. They want that freedom and flexibility to move from one storage to another. And unfortunately, the case is that many backup solutions today simply don't offer that level of freedom. So I think Veeam's really been on the pioneering front of backup in terms of not only where you can deploy the solution, how you can actually store it, and really move from one storage to another with really zero penalization there. So Really great there. Backup control is another big thing for Veeam, really allowing you to back up as often as needed. And really, like I mentioned, recover with a broad range of different options, whether it's back to M365 or back to an individual user or group or a M365 environment from on-prem. So however you need to restore, whether it's to a safe environment or to just a variety of different environments, you have that option and flexibility with Veeam. And lastly, I'll mention scalability. Gosh, I couldn't tell you how many times we've been asked, can you support we have this massive enterprise. In fact, we've had many questions here. What level of enterprise do you support? And ultimately, you want to be able to work with a solution that's purpose-built to handle large amounts of users. You simply don't know whether you're going to explode up to 10,000 users one week, or whether, with the current times, you're going to be down. So ultimately, just having that flexibility of knowing that your backup can handle whatever you throw at it. Very, very important. Now, I do call this, and the MVPs are going to laugh, this is my humble brag slide. But really, this slide is to prove to you, look, this is a battle-tested solution used by many different organizations. You would be in very good company if you adopted a solution such as Veeam. And I do want to also mention, do not take my word for it. If you have not yet been a part of Trust Radius or G2 Crowd or any of those third-party review platforms, please review Veeam on these, but also other solutions as well. You can also do a Veeam versus type comparison, which is very, very helpful for these platforms. And you'll get some great raw and unfiltered reviews. So definitely check that out. Lastly, we have a few items here for you to take action with. There's a variety of different, you had the dummies book up there for a little bit. You've had the Gartner report up there for a bit. You've also now got, with the QR here, a technical guide. So if you are interested in Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, please don't wait. Come check out this guide, and it'll give you a really great idea of the various components it works with, all the various storage offerings. I've only just managed to scrape on the surface in the past few minutes, so feel free to check that out. And of course, see for yourself. You can download a free 30-day trial, after which time it reverts to our community edition, which you can use indefinitely, completely free, as long as it's up to 10 users. So come check that out. Definitely highly recommend it. And lastly, I do promise some folks back at the headquarters to mention there's 15% off. We do have this 15% off of our product for any new customers to Veeam. And if you are already a Veeam customer, I've noticed a few here, but not using M365 Backup, feel free to leverage this 15% off. Really great opportunity here through December 31st. And with that, I do want to give some closing statements here. So the opportunity here for some closing statements. So Joy, any closing parting words for the good folks listening today?
Yes, a couple, and they're going to address, I think, some of the questions that we have in chat as well. You mentioned the community edition up to 10 users, and then Veeam will most definitely handle our ginormous organizations that are out there as well. So it is a scalable solution, which I do think is important, especially if you're a growing business or a small business. There are tools out there, Veeam being one of them, that can meet your needs regardless if you're little bitty or ginormous. And I want to make sure we touch on Krista's question too about, should a weekly backup be enough? Anytime you're thinking about your backups, one of the questions that's good to have in your mind is, how much data are we willing to go without? Are you okay if you need to do a backup and restore to last Friday? Today's Thursday. Are you okay with that gap in data? So it's something to think about. When you're approaching restores, backup solutions, have conversations with your business users. I feel like I say this no matter what topic I'm talking about. Talking with your business owners, your content owners, your content creators is critical to make sure that the solutions you put in place are meeting the needs of those departments, of those people. And each department might have slightly different needs. It's important to take that into account. So talk to your people.
Perfect. Love that. Love that takeaway. Paul, takeaway from you, sir.
Oh, there are a lot of good questions out here. Let me just toss a couple of thoughts out on some of the
Sure.
questions that I've been seeing in here. We've talked a good bit about compliance and about some of the features that are in M365, and we've kind of suggested that they're not good for backup. That's not to suggest that they're not good features. They are. One of the questions was, you've mentioned a lot of bad scenarios for backing up M365. Can you mention any good ones? And I will suggest, for example, the recycle bin is a great tool and will save you a lot of time and effort. I think the point we're trying to make is it's not enough. It'll handle a lot of the day-to-day problems that your organization may face in terms of lost data. But if it's, let's be generous and suggest that the old 80-20 rule is in place, that it'll cover 80% of your problems. You still got 20% of your problems that are a major issue. And that's the issue that we're kind of trying to talk about here. You have to plan beyond the default tools that are in M365, or you're going to find yourself regretting them. The other comment I wanted to make was just about compliance. We've talked about compliance as, people want to use that as an alternative to backup. And yes, there is that. Compliance is really a two-sided edge. On the one hand, compliance is all about legal requirements to maintain data for a specific period of time. But the other side of compliance is that once that period of time is done, then compliance is all about making sure that you've scrubbed out all of those pieces of data and do not have them anymore. So it is both about retention and deletion at the same time. It is making sure that you retain things for the appropriate amount of time and then get rid of them. One of the issues with compliance is that it's just tools. You have to decide what the policies are. You have to decide what the legal requirements are, and then you have to implement those requirements using the tools that are provided. The tools won't do it for you. And in many ways, backup is the same way. You can go buy a product like Veeam. That'll provide you the tools to do backups. But you now have to plan on how to implement those. Where am I going to store the backups? How am I going to transition them? How am I going to see to it that the right people have access to what they need and wrong people don't, to make them secure? Just buying the product is not the end of it. You've still got a lot of work to do. And I think I'll just leave it at that and turn it over and let Vlad do some talking.
Yeah, last but not least, Mr. Vlad, thoughts?
Big takeaway is to build a bit on what Paul said. We might have seemed a bit negative on the built-in backup tools. Do your own research. Delete stuff around. I'd love for each one of you to go try things out. What can you do as a user? What can you do as a site collection admin? What can you do as a global admin? Try things around in your own tenant to see what can we restore, what can we not restore. I really feel like education is a big part of what we're trying to do, and we don't want to seem negative, but go and explore it yourself, understand the limitations. And for a backup, we often look at the cost of a backup solution. Try to look at it as what happens if we don't, how much, if we lose certain things, if we lose one day of work in the whole company, how much does that cost us? And then, especially for the admins out there that were not able to get the budget for it, you'll be able to put some numbers on your request. And hopefully, whatever backup tool you choose, it'll be easier for you to get those approvals. Because a lot of leaders understand only if there's a dollar sign next to it. So if you're able to calculate a lost day of work and things like that, it's always easier to get budget, especially as we're getting near 2023. So that can be one of your New Year's resolutions.
Excellent. It's been wonderful having you all and being able to get your thoughts collectively. I will leave just one last little tagline here. Hope is not a strategy. If you could, you know, take one thing away from this, or at least hopefully there's a couple, but hope is definitely not a strategy in today's IT world. I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to you, David. I know we have a wrap up to do, but again, from my end, really appreciate being here and having the MVPs here as well.
Thank you so much, Edward, Joy, Paul, Vlad. What an excellent conversation. This has been a whole lot of fun. I learned so much. I know the audience did as well. Thank you to the entire MVP panel. And of course, thank you to Veeam for supporting today's event. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up with a gift card announcement. This is going out to Andrew Rossetti from Maryland. Congratulations. We'll reach out to you. And I encourage everyone to check out the handouts tab there for additional resources we talked about, as well as the QR code there on the screen. I hope everyone enjoyed the event and learned a lot. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.